Hey everybody, this is Doug Kenny along with Andy McPhee, and we welcome Ian Ham and his father to Keep on Tracking. How you doing, guys?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Well, thank you, yes.
Yeah, thanks, mate. And listen, I just heard you say something before we recorded. You got over 200 years of family experience in the railways. Can you give us a bit of a rundown on that?
Okay, so Dad's father, my grandfather, was a fettler, worked on the track, on the railway lines. My mum's father, the other grandfather, he worked in he was a train examiner, and then in the bogie exchange at Port Pirie. And they both had around 40 years service. And then my uncle, my mum's brother, he worked in the railways for about 40 years till he retired. And then there's myself, Dad, who retired. He's done 40 years as an engineman from the steam days and that. And then myself, I was in the bogie exchange for 42 years in the railways. And my brother, who's still currently in the railways, he's coming up to 41, 42 years. Yeah.
Right.
So I'll put you on the Dad. He will give you his history when he joined, and yeah, you can ask him questions. He's drove all the old steam trains, so away you go.
Yeah, that's what an amazing story. Like, gosh, that's a ton of years, you know. I've got a few friends that got father and son in there, but you guys, you win the whole trophy.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you? And sorry, I missed your father's name. Apologies for being ignorant. Bob.
Yeah, Bob's my name. Yeah, I joined the South. Yeah, I joined the South Australian Railways in July 1951 as a youth cleaner. And I progressed up through becoming a fireman and a locomotive driver. I was stationed at Peterborough. When I first joined the job, we worked on steam trains, narrow gauge, between Peterborough and Corn, bringing Lee Creek coal down to Adelaide to be burnt in the Osborne Powerhouse, and the iron ore from Broken Hill down to Port Pirie for smelting. And that was the narrow gauge locos. We had T class and a 400 class, and that was the narrow gauge. That went to 1958 when steam finished and diesel locomotives came in, and we start use the diesel locomotives worked on the narrow gauge, and that happened until the Australian National took over from the SAR. That was in 1970 odd. And
78.
78, that's 78. Right, 1978. We became Australian National when the state governments sold out to the Commonwealth, and we became Australian National. And yeah, we progressed from then, and then next thing, big change came when we had the standardisation. That standardised the track from Broken Hill down to Port Pirie and across to Port Augusta. And we worked all those locos, all the big diesel locomotives, starting from the 830s, 600s, onto the bigger 3,000 horsepower ALs, BLs, and we worked those with much larger haulage of ore from Broken Hill, and yeah. So yeah, so that's more or less what happened, and yeah, I worked on three gauges. I worked on the narrow gauge, and then we went to standard gauge, and I also worked on the broad gauge. And when I worked on the broad gauge, that was mainly into Adelaide from Peterborough. They brought the narrow gauge from Tarawi, broad gauge from Tarawi to Peterborough, and we used to work from Peterborough to Adelaide, then on the broad gauge. And we used to work I used to work on the rail cars, Bluebird rail cars that used to run from Peterborough to Adelaide on that. And I also worked on the Commonwealth Bud cars. We had a loan of the Port Augusta Commonwealth Bud car rail cars, and they used to work between Broken Hill and Peterborough. So that I worked on rail cars as well as diesel locos, and yeah.
So you would know a lot of the guys. I joined in '71, so you would know a lot of the old drivers like Jordan Janicevic and those guys from Mile End, I'm sure.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah,
I knew a lot of those fellas.
Yeah, Mick Stankovic.
Yeah, Mick. Yeah.
Yeah, he was my regular mate for a while, but then we had a falling out because he was a bad-tempered bugger.
Yeah, that went on. Hell, I've had several mates, regular mates, but yeah, they were genuine good blokes to work with.
Yeah, they were, mate. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we all had issues, but it was such a good job, and you know, like the blokes I can remember, Jimmy Solbon and Alan Neal, like really just a bunch of good guys. You know, the railway's a different place. You know.
Yeah, I think one of the highlights for me happened in, I think it was '87. The Centenary train worked from Sydney across to Perth, and me and Ashley Sutton, we worked it from Peterborough to Broken Hill on that big locomotive. And at that time, there wasn't too many still qualified blokes that could work steam engines. So we were lucky to be able to work that train. And I tell you what, from years I was sitting there just opening the throttle on a diesel, getting back on a steam locomotive and firing it all the way from Peterborough to Broken Hill. It was an eye-opener. And I tell you, I got off of that loco at Broken Hill. I never slept so tight in all my life.
Was that the Flying
Scotsman? No, the Flying Scot. I worked the Flying Scotsman. It came through in '88, and it was at Peterborough. And we worked from Peterborough to Port Augusta. Ashley Sutton, myself worked that. That was an experience in a lifetime to work the Flying Scotsman, I can tell you. So they were two of the highlights for me, anyhow.
Well, they're amazing. And can you just tell people where the Flying Scotsman came from, how they got it to Australia?
Well, I don't know much how they got it there, but I know it was there. And I know we worked it. It was an education. We had all of the top brass from Adelaide came up, and they rode on the locomotive with us. And
wow.
It was great.
I think they shipped it to Australia.
Yeah, they shipped
to Sydney, and they offloaded it at the docks there. But after that, I don't know. But I think that was in '88.
Yeah.
I don't know where I was at the time. I was in Melbourne somewhere, but I do remember that that coming through. I'm sure Doug will have some questions in a second, but what was it like, Bob, when you were transforming from steam to loco? What was that like, you know, getting onto the diesel locomotives after the steam?
It was a much easier life. The old steam, you had to earn your money on those, and had to know what you were doing, and it was hard. It was hard work. I can tell you, when we used to work the Lee Creek coal from Quorn, that Lee Creek coal was the worst coal you could ever imagine. It was all right. It was being blasted into a furnace like down in Adelaide at Osborne for the electricity, but on a locomotive, it was hopeless. It was hopeless. It used to never burn properly. You couldn't get enough draft, and once it formed, and you put the pricker into to open it up, it'd go into a clinker, and form a whole mass. So you had to stop and clean the fire and start again. And I tell you, we used to be 42 degrees Celsius and working. You'd knock off 3 or 4 water bags before you got home. 12 hours. It was hard yakka, I can tell you.
The boys were a lot fitter back then, right?
Well, you had to be fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of them old drivers, they were hard taskmasters. They wouldn't give you a spell, not the real old blokes. They'd sit there and you'd pull up and they'd say, right, they'd go and get a wheat bag out and sit under a tree, yell out when you got enough steam and water and I'll come over.